Hi guys, and welcome to another exciting episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi. This month we are finding wisdom from this book because it's Ivy Fourwee's 1 year anniversary. Last week we focused on chapters 1, 2, and 3. This week we're focusing on chapters 4, 5, and 6. The last chapter from last week was intention, which is the art of knowing why you're doing what you're doing. And from intention, we get to self awareness. And basically, self awareness for me is the ability to understand yourself, to self master, to know what you want internally. So that is what manifests for you externally. And it takes a lot of forms. And I make the example of when I was in coaching school and I was told I'm not a good listener. And I was a bit offended because I consider myself a good listener, but um, being self-aware knows that you come with faults, you come with mistakes, you come with shadows, you come with darkness, and not one aspect of you is more important than the other ones. Like the yin and the yang, they both merge and create who you are. And on self-awareness, I always emphasize the fact that our shadow is as good as or important as our light. We just need to be aware of both the elements, like a Gemini. You need to understand your devil as well as your God all the time, every time. And that takes being able to receive criticism, constructive criticism, of course, and just the ability for you to internalize what you are receiving and having the ability to decipher what's important to you and what's not. And self-aware obviously comes with the ability to listen, um, the ability to be in solitude, and the ability to have intention, and always learning and always evolving. We get better all the time by allowing ourselves to know our faults and having the audacity to actually correct them, and where our strengths lie, to make sure that we nurture those, so that our weaknesses are not as strong. So self-awareness is a very important aspect to self-mastery, knowing yourself internally before you know yourself externally, and knowing exactly why the person that you are externally is the reason why it is. So self-awareness, you might not know what you're not aware of. Like, we have blind spots as human beings and rely on other people to show us those blind spots. So self-awareness is very important. The next chapter we talk about is dealing with the past. And I make the example of when I eventually got to the job of my dreams. I was happy there. And a fortunate incident happened. I say fortunate now because I'm a firm believer in you cannot tell the story until the story is complete. Had you asked me this, if this was a fortunate incident before, I would have said, hell no, it's unfortunate. But really, when you're on the other side, you get to see things differently. And for me, I got my dream job, and I had a manager that was very much mirroring my past, in terms of how I grew up in dysfunctionality, and those triggers came to the forefront, and I got to realize or have a better self-awareness of myself than I did before that incident. So basically, she was overbearing, micromanaging, never giving anybody a chance. And I grew up in a similar environment where you are literally the child and have to be subjected to what's going on around you, whether you like it or not. And I had to realize in that incident that I had unhealed wounds in my shadow that were triggered. And I did act out, and it wasn't cute at all. Matter of fact, it just put me more into anxiety, more into more depression. You get to find out about it more on chapter 5, but really, it was just a bad situation for me, but a very important one ultimately, because I got to understand that I had trust and control issues, but that was because I was never afforded my freedoms growing up. So if I felt like someone was trying to take away from my freedom, then I act out. And that brings about all the different elements that are in my shadow, the anger, the violence, etc., etc. So I had to go back to the past and sort of like try to understand why I was the way I was and why I was reacting like that in that environment. And it was as simple as the fact that my manager was behaving in a similar manner to the environment I grew up in, which is insecurity, which is a lot of other things, control factors, and that triggered my insecurities and my control factors. And it was a bad circumstance until I could realize it for what it was. And a good aspect that came from that was the fact that because I was pressed in an environment that I thought I wanted to be in, like it was my dream job, obviously, it made me realize very, very important things. Holding on to things is not important at all. It's easier for you to let it go. Anything that's tough, if you let it go, it doesn't exist anymore. And when I was in that environment, I was fighting for a voice that I thought I deserved to have, but I was going about it the wrong way. The story could have been different in so many different ways had I known I was being triggered, but I didn't. So one thing I learned is to drop things, let them go. The past, you need to let it go. Whatever it is, just drop it. If you hold on to things, they have a way of hurting you even more. And I learned that the hard way. And then the second thing that I learned was the fact that really being in corporate is not the ultimate dream for me. I like it. It was a dream for me once upon a time because I wanted to achieve certain things, but that solidified the fact that I wanted to move more towards my purpose of being a healer, an author, a writer, and all around creative, and focusing on my internal purpose that I believe I'm supposed to exude into this world. So that was a fortunate circumstance because it led me to my path, but really it helped me because it allowed me to go back to the past, realize what I didn't realize there, and then just let it go. Um, when dealing with the past, you have to go back and feel the pains that you refused to feel at the time or you had masked at the time. Allow them to come into the forefront and then let them go. Holding on makes things worse. So that's what I learned about dealing with the past. The last the last chapter for today, but not the last chapter of the book, is communication. So when I was doing my internship, I got an opportunity to be permanent. I got the job, and but they were not paying me the salary that I wanted, and so told them no, I don't want the contract because I'm not going to do it. And no one heard what I was saying for the longest time, and I could have gone back to what I wanted to say and say, okay, no, it's fine, I'll take the contract. Doesn't matter if I'm going to be poor, I'll take it. But because I knew I didn't want to, and I knew I was not going to be able to, because obviously I couldn't afford a damn thing, I went back over and over again and told the GM, I'm not taking the contract, I'm not taking the contract, I'm not taking the contract. In my head, I was already sure about going back to the poverty of being an unemployed graduate because what I was getting was a worst of circumstance. And eventually months passed, and then eventually they were like, okay, now it's fine, we'll increase it. And I learned the art of having a single minded message. If you're trying to get your point across, don't change your story. If you're trying to get your point across, don't change your story. When a person comes to you, no, I don't want it. When a person comes to you, no, I don't want it. When a person comes to you, no, I don't want it. Or if you do want it, then say yes. But you need to have a single story that you're trying to tell in any situation where you're trying to communicate and you're not being heard. Say that over and over again. In marketing at school, they taught us three things: say what you're going to say it, and say what you've said. Because it's very important to repeat the same thing over and over again. That's how manifestation works. If you say it over and over again, if it's in your head over and over again, it's going to pop up in real life too. So I learned that about communication: opening up, saying the same thing over and over again if you're trying to get your point across. If you are trying to be a good communicator, what I learned is what I call active listening, which is basically listening to a person, receiving what they're saying without you trying to say you're saying. For example, if someone is saying something that you relate to, you don't have to chime in with your insinuations about what you're insinuating the person is trying to say. All you have to do is just listen, respond where you are supposed to respond. If you're not supposed to respond, then don't respond. Listen, don't say a thing, and let the person have their peace. If they come to you and at some point there's something you need to say back, then you say it. And that's really how listening works. It's giving the opportunity to the person who's saying something without you feeling the need to say something back at all. So if you're communicating, say the same thing over and over again. But if you are on the other side of receiving communication, just listen. Don't say a thing. Let the person have their peace. And if there's a reason for you to communicate back, then do it. Oftentimes is because we receive so much information, we feel like we should be sending back as much information, which stops us from being able to receive what's being said. So just to reiterate, chapter 4 talks about self-awareness, which is the ability to know yourself internally so that you can take that person out to the world, and being aware of your shadows and being aware of your devil. There's nothing wrong with who you are. You are perfect the way that you are. Whether or not you've got more low vibrations and high vibrations, at some point you're going to be able to merge them and have the yin and the yang. So trust yourself, but know exactly why you're acting the way that you act, and have a good intention aligned to who you're trying to be. The second thing is the past. When dealing with the past, it's important to go back, feel whatever pains you were supposed to feel, immerse yourself in that moment so that you can release it back to the ether, and then go about your business that you were supposed to go about anyway. So the past just means being there and then dropping it immediately. And then the last thing, which is communication, have a single-minded message when you're trying to talk. And if you're receiving information, be an active listener. Don't talk back. Give the person active, adequate time to say their piece. If there's something for you to respond, you do. If there's nothing for you to respond, you don't. Thank you so much. I am going to be back doing the last 4 chapters of the book, I think, next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Looks and Wisdom, celebrating the 1-year anniversary of I Before We. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining. See you next week with another episode of Looks and Wisdom with Oluchi.